Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Canny Commuting, the series that makes it easier for people to walk, cycle, wheel, and get public transport to work and for work. Canny Commuting is brought to you by My Journey Hampshire in association with Sustrans and is funded by National Highways. My name is Andy, and I am your Canny Commuter in Chief. Welcome to the Canny Commuting Kitchen, where we broadcast all our episodes from. And today is, well, I'm quite excited about today. I know that's terrible. I'm always really excited about this, aren't I? So episode 14 is mixed modal journeys. It's combining walking, cycling, wheeling with public transport all on the same journey. I have been doing mixed modal travel in Hampshire for about the last 15 years for work and for pleasure. And prior to that, I did a certain degree of it in Scotland and in the Midlands in previous jobs. And today I am joined by two brand new Canny commuters who are going to share their experiences of mixed modal travel in our area. So first up, I am going to introduce you to Helen. Helen, would you like to talk to us about who you are and what your experience of mixed modal travel is?
Thank you, Andy. Hello, everyone. So my name is Helen. I work for Sustrans and I manage the active travel programme for East Sussex County Council. I've recently moved to near Sheffield in the edge of the Peak District, and I work mostly from home, but do have to travel back for occasional meetings. And I'm going to be starting a new role soon where I'll have to travel into Leeds or Manchester a couple of days a week. And I don't own a car, so I've got quite a lot of experience of mixed modal, multimodal, it's a bit of a tongue twister, multimodal transport. I tend to walk for local trips under a couple of miles, and I use my bike for just about everything else. And I regularly combine cycling with the train to travel further distances, or if I'm carrying a heavy load. And I realised that for a lot of people, it might feel quite complicated trying that for the first time. Lots of different things to think about, different elements, you know, what you're going to wear, connections, what happens at the other end, how you get your bike on the train. And there's loads of things that I've learned over the years. So yeah, really delighted to be here and be able to share some tips for what's helped me make those journeys more smooth.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And next on my list of Canny commuters who is brand new to the show, it is a real pleasure to introduce Jason to you. Jason, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and why we've got you on today?
Yeah, sure. Jason Light, I'm the head of sustainability and energy at University Hospital Southampton NHS Foundation Trust. And I think Andy said earlier, we're kind of new Canny commuters. Hopefully I've probably been a Canny commuter for a very long time, probably my whole life actually. Thinking back, with even multimodal as well, it wasn't uncommon for me to get the bus into town on a night out and then walk home 10 miles to save the pennies from the cab for other uses. Yeah, and it's something that I do pretty much every day. So similar to Helen, I don't own a car anymore. I think it's been about 7 years since I've had my own car, which was difficult. I should say it was a big transition from having my own personal car. We have a electric van which my wife uses at home, and if it needs some new tyres, then it's mine to sort out, and the rest of the time it's my wife's vehicle. So I think the last time I used that to get to work was when there was all of the storms and I needed to be on site in case there was a power cut, and didn't really fancy cycling in 70-mile-an-hour winds, and it was quite a challenging day. But most people would stay at home on a day like that, but I needed to be in for resilience reasons. And my usual commute is either a 10-mile bike ride, or I walk for a kilometre, get a train, and then get a bus once I get into Southampton. So it's, yeah, very mixed modal depending on what I do for travelling.
Ace, thank you. So here's my first question to you both is, why do you mix modes when you're traveling on a single journey? And I'm going to let whoever feels most enthusiastic jump in first.
I mean, I would say first off, choice. So it is my choice not to drive. And my first choice would usually be, my default choice is to jump on my bike. But if the weather's bad, if I've got stuff to carry, if I need to be somewhere in a certain time, then combining it with train can make it really easy for me, because that's the modes that I've got used to using. When I'm on the train, I can relax, perhaps do a bit of work if I'm going to a meeting, stare out the window if I just want to have a bit of time to myself. And I find the experience enjoyable. And at the other end, when I jump on my bike, when I'm somewhere new, getting the feel for a place much more than, you know, if I just arrived in a metal box in a car. So it helps me connect with my place. I find it straightforward. Now I've got used to some of those things that people might first find a bit difficult. And yeah, it's just for ease, really.
Cool. Jason, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, it's necessity, I would say, for mixed modal, because obviously I don't live next to the train station, and my work is a good 4K from the train station. So there's a need there that I have to mix modal in order to get in via public transport. But yeah, similar to Helen, was for me personally, there's environmental concern is what was one of the big drivers for that. There's also the cost side of things, which can change depending on, you know, it can appear cheaper to drive, but particularly someone like me that doesn't travel in every day and there's different routes, it definitely doesn't work out cheaper to pay for a car and everything else. I think that for me, very much the mental health side as well. So can be quite a tough day, and it's almost either on the bike or on the train, I find quite shockingly relaxing. Even my 10-mile commute, or, you know, when I get caught up in delays and stuff, it's just I've learned to make that part of my normal life, and it's a really good way to have a break from work brain.
I would absolutely agree with what Jason just said, and I think sort of having that gap between work and home where you're doing some physical activity, it really kind of lets it out. And you know, it's a cheap and easy way to fit physical activity into your daily life as well, rather than paying to go to a gym or a class if, you know, you're trying to. Yeah. So has those benefits as well.
And it's I think the other thing I find is in a car, you feel more responsible for how long it's taking you to get to work. And I mean, it's similar with a bike, but people seem a bit more chilled if you get a puncture or something. But when you're on a train or a bus, you've got no control, and there's something about that makes it a far more relaxing experience for me. And I've been on trains and get delayed, and you sort of phone in the office, so you know, I might miss that meeting, but the train's been cancelled or something. But it's societally that's more acceptable than I'm driving in, but I'm stuck in a traffic jam, I'm going to be late, and it just, I feel so much more comfortable. It sort of takes some responsibility off in a weird way.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of joke that the reason I mix modal travel is because I'm lazy, but then that's my fundamental reason for doing anything. And I started because I live in Winchester and I worked in Portsmouth, and I really wanted to not drive to work. And yes, you can ride from Winchester to Portsmouth, and it's about an hour and a half to 2 hours if you're given it some, but that's not really something that works with doing a full day of work. So I got very used to that, ride into the station, get on the train, and then ride to work at the far end. And it's kind of become habit. But now that I've got a patch that covers kind of everywhere from my house over to there, the ability to jump on a train and then have a kind of radius of about a 15-20 minute bike ride around that to get to meetings gets me to virtually anywhere I want to go to, which is why I'm such a massive advocate of traveling mixed modally. We've kind of started covering it, but Which particular modes do you use most?
Yeah,
Go on, Helen.
I'm a big fan of bike and train for longer distances. Just that combination works really well for me, rather like Jason and yourself, Andy. I live about 20 kilometres from the train station. So I'm going to get a good ride in if I'm catching a train, which works for me. I enjoy that. And then my kind of local train station, Sheffield, which you can get down to London in less than 2 hours. You can travel north. So it just opens up the whole of the UK to me, which is great for holidays, for visiting friends, for getting to work, for kind of those longer journeys. And then for shorter journeys, unfortunately, our buses don't take bikes. Otherwise, I'd probably try that. They do in Scotland. And someone was mentioning to me earlier that they'd seen buses with bike racks in Dorset years ago, but I don't think they exist anymore. So walking and the bus is great. And I like what Jason said around, get the bus into town and walk back. I remember that from my uni days. So yeah, they're the combinations that work for me.
Is that the same for you, Jason?
Not anymore. I mean, I used to, before I was too confident with cycling, I used to quite often cycle to the train station and get the train. Or quite fortunate that my routes to work, either in this role or previous roles, have always had kind of almost followed the railway route. So I used to quite often sort of start cycling in and then not feel up for it and then hop on the train and finish the journey. And it was like a safety net for getting more confident for doing longer range commuting on a bike. I've kind of gone the other way now that I sort of almost refuse to take my bike on a train and just don't really enjoy that experience. I kind of get a bit paranoid my bike's going to get nicked, or I'm not very savvy about booking stuff in, and which is why I quite often walk. Or if I went up to Birmingham for a work trip the other day, and I walked up to get the first train, and then by the time I got to Birmingham, I got a cab the other side, which if I'd taken my bike, I could have done a different option. But and that's just I don't know, it's a bit about relaxing a bit more, but also I've had a couple kind of struggles to get bikes on at times, and I had an issue when I came back from Glasgow in the climate conference where I lost a load of kit because the train suddenly stopped and I had to run down the train and try and get my bike off. And I think it's an area where I'm not too savvy, where I could probably learn quite a bit from Helen on how to manage that.
Which actually leads us really nicely to what I was going to ask about next was, are there any issues that you've had in terms of mixing modes and combining things together, and any tips that you've found about how you overcome those? And while you're thinking about that, one of the things that I've learned over years of taking my bike on the train is that everything being in one place can really help with my stress. So if everything I've got goes in bags and goes on the bike, if I'm not carrying anything when I'm doing that transfer between being outside the station and being on the train, that takes a load of the stress out for me. Because if everything is in my pannier and that goes on my bike, I know I've got everything, and it's all on wheels, which means I don't have to worry about carrying things and bumping into people, which I find really helpful. But that's kind of my first tip. But what about you, Helen? What have you kind of worked out over the years?
Yeah, it's a good tip, Andy. I like that one. Yeah, I think sort of firstly, if it involves a train, like check the trains, like are they running? Are there engineering works? Is there bus replacement? I've been caught out with that before and had to kind of jump on my bike to try and get to the connecting train. What's their cycle policy? We know that each train operating company, has different kind of ways to book your bike on, or you might not be allowed your bike on at a certain time. So make sure you're clear on that. If I'm going to London, obviously, when you book a train all the way through, it will include the tube. Can't take your bike on the tube. Definitely need to remember that. Work out your journey between the main stations. And London's got some great cycling infrastructure. So, you know, just make sure that you've planned the route and you left enough time for that connection. So checking the trains is kind of my first big tip. And think about the timings, like, you know, what I always work backwards. So when do I need to kind of be at my destination? And, you know, try and check how often the trains run. I don't want to leave it that I'm just relying on this one particular train, particularly if there's a connection. And you know, there's nothing worse than kind of rushing, you know, to get a connection with your bag and your bike and, you know, up and down stairs and all of that. So yeah, try and sort of leave myself some options. And if I'm thinking of traveling at rush hour, you know, is that necessary? Could I avoid it? Could I go a different route so I'm not on a really busy train with my bike and commuters? And at the other end, what's my journey like? Have I got enough time as well to get to where I want to? And really just trying to make it as smooth as possible. So I always pre-purchase my train ticket, usually trying to have an e-ticket so I'm not fumbling about for paper in amongst bags and other bits and pieces. And yeah, around the kind of station. So, you know, particularly if there's a change, what's the station layout like? You know, are there stairs, lifts? How am I going to get my bike to a different platform if I need to change trains? And yeah, I mean, I can go on. What kind of train will I be traveling on? You know, is it a long train? Has it got, you know, a separate carriage for bikes? Is it shared with kind of wheelchair users and people with push chairs, and kind of how's that going to work? You know, have you got to kind of lift your bike up and put it on a hook? And, you know, so really kind of getting to know what the cycle provision's like on the train. If I'm going somewhere new, like there's usually a train guard on the platform, have a chat, ask him or her, ask them, you know, where's the carriage going to be, so that you can get ready on the platform to jump on the train. And what you said, Andy, about kind of removing your bags to get your bike on the train, that's a really important one. And particularly if you're on a long distance train, you've got to put your bike in a separate carriage and then go and find your seat. I've done that before, and I've gone to find my seat and I've sat down and the air conditioning's come on and I'm there in Lycra and I haven't got my packed lunch and I'm stuck for 2 hours on the train without those things that I want off of my bike. So that's a really important tip for me. Like, think about what you're going to need on the train if you're on a longer distance journey. I can go on.
I was going to say, you know, Jason, have you got any perspective as someone who isn't taking who is using foot and potentially bus at the other end, and how you kind of connect those together?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, some of the stuff Helen said, the staff are always fabulous when you speak to people on trains. And we had a free upgrade to first class because we were chatting to the train guard the other day. I've had that twice now. You did a little birthday announcement. I probably shouldn't say because you probably get told off, but it was lovely. You know, they are great, and the ticket staff will advise you on all sorts of things and do split tickets for you and things like that. So always ask for assistance. I think generally on routing and stuff, if you can find something, maybe in your workplace there might be a bike user group or an active travel group. Ask people for advice, because they might know a better route or some alternative stuff that you wouldn't necessarily get from Googling. I've found some really good little shortcuts and stuff and ways of dealing with that. Most places you can have some space to kind of have a locker, so you might want to get changed. Even if you're quite often, I even when I walk and cycle, I'll get changed and I'll be more comfy, and I might have some walking shoes rather than my work shoes, and just swap them over when I get in. So that can kind of make it a bit more enjoyable and take the edge off it, which is good. I think for the kind of mixed modes that I do, so the train and bus, because I do it ad hoc, I don't do it through a season ticket. I use the Plus Bus service, so you pay a couple quid and you get a bus ticket, for the day for the city that you're departing on. A slight tip that Parkway in Eastleigh is sort of deemed to be Southampton. So I've had some debates with bus drivers there, but they've always let me on with a Southampton Plus bus. And I've managed to get on with an Eastleigh Plus bus before from the same spot, because it's right on the kind of on the edge. So if you're nice, people can be nice back most of the time. So that's definitely something to look at. The thing I find with the Plus bus that works really well for me is I have 2 different bus companies that will take me from the train station to the hospital. So it gives me some options depending on what the bus times are, or if one of the services is down. The thing I learned quite early on when I started here was I noticed people doing the same journey as me, and a couple of them, the Blue Star would pull up and then they would queue up for it, and then when a City Red turned up, they would come out the queue and get a City Red, because it doesn't stop in as many stops. So I now do that, and it shaves good 10-15 minutes depending on the time of day off the journey. And because I've got the Plus bus, I can use it on both of them, whereas if I bought a weekly Blue Star permit, it wouldn't let me use the other service. So it gives me a bit of flexibility and some options. So that's quite good. As Helen said, always check the timetables. I've done it before where I've checked it, walked out of the house and got to the train station after a quarter of an hour and find out that the trains are all cancelled. But that's not that often. And things like real train times is the kind of service that I use, which you can see exactly where a train is. And a few times I've been there and it said train should be here in 10 minutes, and I know from the app that it hasn't even departed London yet. So that's a great tool. You can really see whether or not and how many minutes something's late on that. So definitely use that. I'll get Andy to CGI the web address for that.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's got.
We'll edit that in. It's fine.
So that's definitely something I would suggest. But yeah, I would speak to, particularly if you've got people going to the same location, I'd speak to colleagues. It's a really good way, because people know what works for them, and they might. I've had it here where someone says, "Oh, actually, if you go out the back, there's a cutway and it takes you to a bus stop that's 5 minutes along the journey." Things like that. You can really find some great examples.
Nice. Couple of things that occurred to me out of that. One thing that I learned the hard way when I worked in Portsmouth is that a train is never late until it's supposed to have left its starting station. And I had to leave my office before it was due to leave the harbour in Portsmouth. So I never had any idea whether it was on time, other than by looking at the 1 hour beforehand and seeing if that had been delayed. Because it was still on time. As far as the train company was concerned, it's on time until it hasn't left the starting station on time. So that's the thing to watch out for if you live near the end of the line. And as Helen was talking about transfers and kind of changing trains on a journey, getting around a station with a bike takes longer than on foot. And I'm pretty happy carrying my bike up and down stairs, but decide before you do it whether you're going to carry it up and down the stairs or use the lift, and just commit to that rather than try and think about it in the moment. So go, actually, do you know what? Bike's really heavy, just going to use the lift today, and go straight to the lift. But do be aware that it can take a while to get through lifts because of capacity. So you go, and there will be, up one lift, walk across the bridge and down another lift. So just add in an extra few minutes into that. So what would be like a 2-minute walk across the station could be 5 or 6 minutes if you've got a bike or if you've got heavy bags. And that's definitely a thing that I would recommend to people.
Yeah, and obviously some stations don't have lifts, which can be a challenge. The other thing, with more modern staircases, they put a little channel that you can put the bike wheel in. And I've seen people really struggling to push bikes and lift them over bridges, and I've just gone, have you tried putting it in the thing? And then they just wandered up the stairs pushing their bike. And they're easily missed, and they're certainly not, there's a massive issue with accessibility for people in wheelchairs or with prams. I've probably carried 20 prams upstairs in my time for people, and that's, not exaggerating, it's probably way more than that over the years, from getting trains to Botley Station and Hedge End Station and Swanwick Station. which are my main three that I use, and none of them have got lifts. So it's which is a shame, but
definitely. And that kind of thing around getting from the train onto the street, essentially, like remember the barriers. So, you know, with ticket barriers, some of them are people shaped, and then some of them are kind of wider where, you know, pushchairs, wheelchairs and bikes can fit through. So choose the right one. And again, as Andy said, sometimes there's a bit of a queue. So, you know, that might sort of add on a couple of seconds, but it all adds up. So, you know, just sort of bear that in mind when planning the journey.
The other kind of thing I've experienced, so there's always things that go wrong, and it may have changed, but there used to be a passenger charter rule or guideline that if you've queued for more than 5 minutes, it's sort of deemed that you've attempted to get a ticket, and guards are a little bit kinder with you. So that's certainly something I've done before, where there's been a big queue for some reason, maybe the ticket office is closed or one of the other machines is down, and normally if you're point that out, they'd be really quite kind with you. The other kind of things around train, obviously most trains there's an orange light on the side which shows you where the guards stood, so if you look out for that, if you haven't got a ticket, find that bit as the train comes in and go to that door, and you can speak to the guard before you get on and say, can I get a ticket off you, which is quite important. And if you ever get caught out, maybe it's a busy train, you've had to jump on because you have to get to your journey, the ticket enforcement people on platforms have slightly different legislation to do with platforms than they have on trains, and if it's over 100 quid more, you can get fined by those people compared to 20 quid fixed fare on a train. So if you think you're going to get caught out by someone just quite innocently, you might actually be better off getting back on the train than trying to walk through a doorway with those people. So and I've been caught out quite innocently on rush hour when I tried to, and I had to pay a big fine which would have only been 20 quid. But yeah, and there's no comeback on that because it's based on you being stood on a train platform. You can't really argue with that. So that's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, and on that note, it's probably worth learning there are many different people who work at train stations, and they all have different knowledges and expertise. So these people that Jason's talking about are called revenue protectors in the southwestern area. Their main concern is, as the title suggests, protecting their revenue. Guards can be really quite helpful. Platform dispatch people are often really good at knowing exactly where to get on and off trains. So you kind of learn to recognize these people. Amber, do we have any questions before I go through my list of other things that I want to talk about?
No questions from this end, no.
So Jason talked about the app that you get your live train times. I know we talked briefly beforehand about, Helen, where you get yours from, but what's your preferred source of information about train times?
Sure, I just use the National Rail app actually. I find that the information on there is really clear. It shows live trains and it has cycle policy on there as well. So you can see, you know, when a train has left a station and, you know, how many stops there are and what time it's estimated to get into the next station. So I find that really useful. Just on booking bikes on the train, actually something that I've sort of learned over the years. Often there's cycle policy information on a website and it suggests phoning a number where you've got to kind of go through pressing different buttons, and you might eventually at the end get to speak to someone after about half an hour of being on hold if you're lucky, or get cut off. Not all companies are like that, but I've had that experience. Or you fill in a web form and kind of wait and see if you've got your bike booked on. Now, when you want to book that cheap ticket, maybe you're using a rail split website, or, you know, you're booking the day before, you don't want to hang around and see if you're going to get your bike on or not. In those circumstances, something that I've done is just take to Twitter, just tag the train operating company saying struggling to get through, want to book my bike on, and usually they get back to you within an hour or two, because it's in the public domain, and they've usually got someone monitoring their social media. So that's my top tip. If you can't book your bike on, take to social media.
Super. Which probably leads neatly onto kind of top tips. I think it probably is, because we're kind of running out of eggs. I'm just going to read this question from Casey a second. So it's around, rather than having kind of planned long journeys, how do you cope with those shorter ad hoc journeys that are kind of on the spur of the moment, where you decide you're going to do something and you don't have time to plan it? What advice would you give for someone just doing those journeys?
I mean, as someone who's never had a car, I just, I guess it's that thing that almost, if you've got to pop to the shops, just do it. Just try and get out and do it, and you might find a route first of all that takes a bit longer, and as you do this more and more, it will just become the natural thing to do. If you are going to the supermarket, something I still do it, and I don't know why, I get one of those pull along baskets and I load it up with stuff, and then I go and pay, and then I put it in my rucksack, and then I'm like, oh no, I've got to carry this back. How am I going to get it back up the hill? So I'm really considering, since I've moved somewhere a bit more hilly, getting a trolley so I can pull that shopping back up my hill. But it's not something I've tried yet. And I guess really just getting out there and doing it, I think is the thing to do, and learning what works for you.
Jason?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to do some of these is where you can kind of bake it into your existing journey. So sometimes when I got off the bus, I'll go and pop in the shops and do the shopping, then get back on. Or if I go down Shirley High Street, I can get off the bus, do some shopping, get back on the next bus, get to the train station. I've kind of fitted things in. It's also quite good with trains that not a lot of people realise that if you've got a return ticket, you can use those back and forth tickets in all sorts of different ways. So if I know I'm going out to Winchester, I'll buy a return ticket to Winchester. I'll say Eastleigh, I'll get a return ticket from Swanwick to Eastleigh. I'll get off in Southampton, get the bus to work, come back to Southampton, get the train to Eastleigh, go out for the night, get the train from Eastleigh to Fareham, and then back down the Swanwick line, and kind of utilise the same tickets for multiple uses. And as long as it's within the same 24 hours and I'm not going back on myself, they probably wouldn't know if you were going back on yourself, but it's a great way of kind of fitting some of those in. Obviously a bike's not too bad for little ad hoc. You can, obviously things like Deliveroo and things are quite good. And I've gone places before. I once went in IKEA on the train with my wife, and we bought a bookcase. So we just did a 24-hour, 20 quid hire van and drove it home and came back again. We considered taking it on the train, but that didn't seem like a sensible thing to do, particularly if someone doesn't like taking bikes. But I think when it's really ad hoc, you can do things. I've been out before with the dog and got injured and hopped in. I booked a cab, and the cab was quite nice, and we spoke to them beforehand, and they let us take the dog with us to get home on the cab. So there's emergency kind of things you can do. I really like what Sustrans do with events, where they quite often will get their material delivered to the venue via a courier, so they can then travel. They're not having to drive a car to hold a workshop the next day. They can just turn up on their bikes. So that's quite good. And obviously making sure you've got the right kit. People can be quite forgiving, so I won't leave my bike anywhere because I love my bike, and I will phone ahead if I'm meeting someone. So I've gone to see to other organisations, and they've let me park in the staff bike lockup. They've just kind of let me in and parked up, which is great. I've taken my bike into shops where you're not meant to, and they been fine. I've literally went to the co-op the other day and I just walked the bike in, left it by the till, went around the shop and came back again. Normally if you're nice and a bit confident, they'll let you off. I went to a cinema showing and wheeled my bike into the cinema and literally had it next to the screen last year when I did the climate cycle. And it kind of, I told the staff I was dressing the room because it was a sustainable travel event. And then when I came back from the bar, there was 3 bikes there where other people had obviously seen me, and I'd kind of broken windowed the room, and everyone else thought it was a legitimate thing. So you can, I think, if you ask, you can never be too cheeky. Sometimes people quite like it. So,
definitely, yeah, I really agree with that. Around, you know, I take my bike in shops all the time and just have a chat with the person behind the counter, and they're usually, you know, happy for you to tuck it away as long as you're not in there for hours.
And it's that's what quite, I'd say the only kind of mistake thing that I look out for sometimes is where I once got the train and I got the bus on the wrong side of the train station and stood there for half an hour and no bus turned up because I didn't know that there was a difference between term time and non-term time to get through university. So we can all get caught out by those mistakes. So knowing the area and looking at the signs and stuff is quite important.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to ad hoc stuff, some of my tips are, as Jason said, you know, that your train ticket usually says on it by any reasonable route. And so long as you are somewhere between your start and finish point, you're probably fine. The other thing is that most public transport is really habitual. So you'll find that on most routes, the trains leave at the same minutes past the hour, most hours. And so I don't have to memorize a whole train time. I just have to memorize that it's 15 minutes past the hour, 30 minutes past the hour, and on the hour. And I can kind of hold a mental map. So if I decide I'm going to go somewhere, I've kind of got the trains there, and also learn where the stations are along a route so that you can go, well, I'm going to go to there, I'm going to get off. But I don't necessarily have to get back on there. I can get back on at the next one, and you're still kind of on the same train. Okay, that is just about all we've got time for this afternoon. Before I go any further, can I say a massive thank you to Jason and Helen. We've learned a huge amount from your expertise and from your experience today, and I'm really pleased that you're able to make the time to be with us today. So thank you very much. I will just get on with doing the closing remarks, and then we will let everyone go. So that is mixed modal travel. As I say, Canny Commuting is a My Journey Hampshire production and is brought to you in association with Sustrans. We are funded by National Highways. My name is Andy, and I can be found on social media, particularly on Twitter at SustransAndy, where I will answer anyone's questions at more length than you would really like. We are back here next week when we are going to be talking about getting to hard to reach places. So finding your way to those places where public transport doesn't make it easy to get to. So with that, thank you all very much for coming. We will see you all next week. Enjoy the week. Goodbye.